The acrid smell of smoke still clings to my fingers as I hold what remains of my mother's copy of Pride and Prejudice. Nothing but charred edges and ash-stained pages that crumble at my touch. My hands are trembling, and I can barely breathe through the tightness in my chest. My name is Skylar, and until today, I thought I knew what it meant to lose something precious. When Mom died 2 years ago, I inherited her collection of vintage novels, leather-bound treasures that still carried the scent of her perfume. Now they're gone, destroyed in what my sister Reagan claims was just an accident. I was just trying to clear some space in the attic, she says, standing in the doorway with that familiar look of defensive indifference. The candle must have tipped over when I was moving boxes. A candle? I whirl around, my voice cracking. Who uses candles in an attic full of books? The power was out, Sky. What was I supposed to do? Wait, use your phone? Literally anything else? I'm shouting now, and I don't care who hears. These were Mom's books, Reagan, her entire collection. First editions, annotations, everything. My fiancé Gerald appears behind Reagan, probably drawn by the commotion. Everything okay up here? I smelled smoke. No, I cut him off. Everything is not okay. Reagan just burned Mom's entire library. Reagan's face flushes. It wasn't intentional. God, you always do this. Act like I'm some kind of monster who what? Who destroys the only things we had left of her? I thrust the ruined book toward her. Look at this. Look what you did. Skylar. Gerald steps between us, his voice calm but firm. Maybe we should take a break. Get some air. I don't need air. I snap, pushing past them both. I need my mother's books back, but that's not possible now, is it? I storm down to the kitchen, where my best friend Nicole is still setting up for what was supposed to be a casual Sunday brunch. Her eyes widen as I enter, probably noticing the soot on my clothes and the wild look I must have in my eyes. What happened? She asks, abandoning the mimosa she was mixing. Reagan happened. I grab a glass of water, my hands still shaking. She burned them, Nick. All of Mom's books, every single one. What? How? A candle. I laugh, but it comes out more like a sob. She brought a lit candle into the attic. Who does that? Nicole reaches for my hand, but I pull away. I can't handle sympathy right now. It feels too much like acceptance, and I refuse to accept this. Maybe some can be salvaged, she suggests gently. We could try to— You don't understand, I interrupt, my voice breaking. These weren't just books. They were everything. Mom's notes in the margins, her thoughts, her dreams, the little pressed flowers she kept between pages, the letter she wrote me on my 16th birthday, tucked into Jane Eyre. All of it. Just gone. Reagan appears in the doorway, her artistic hands twisted together nervously. Sky, please. I said I was sorry. I'll replace them. Replace them? The laugh that escapes me is harsh, bitter. These were first editions, Reagan. Mom collected them for 30 years. You can't just pop down to Barnes & Noble and replace them. I know that, but nothing. I meet her eyes, and for the first time in my life, I feel something dark and unfamiliar stirring in my chest. You know what? Just go. Go back to your apartment. Go back to your art. Go wherever you want. Just get out of my sight. Skylar, Gerald warns, but I ignore him. Reagan's face hardens, that familiar mask of indifference sliding back into place. Fine. Call me when you're done being dramatic. She turns and leaves, her footsteps echoing through the house we grew up in, the house that suddenly feels too empty and too full at the same time. Nicole touches my arm. She didn't mean to. Don't. I shake my head, staring at the ashes still clinging to my hands. Just don't. I look down at the ruined book again, at the barely legible inscription on the inside cover. To my darling girls, may you find yourselves in these pages as I have. Love, Mom. Something shifts inside me, something cold and determined. Reagan has always been careless with the things that matter to me, always skating by with half-hearted apologies and claims of innocence. But this time is different. This time, she's destroyed something irreplaceable. And as I stand there, surrounded by the people who love me, all I can think about is how to make her understand exactly what that feels like. You can't seriously be thinking about revenge, Nicole says, stirring her coffee as we sit in her kitchen the next morning. That's not you, Sky. I haven't slept. The smell of smoke seems permanently lodged in my nostrils, and every time I close my eyes, I see Mom's books turning to ash. Maybe it's time it was me. Have you tried calling Reagan? Maybe if you both just... I did call her. I cut in, my voice sharp. Want to know what she said? She told me I was being melodramatic and that they're just books. Nicole winces. Okay, that's not great. Not great? I slam my mug down, coffee sloshing over the rim. She destroyed the last connection I had to Mom, and she can't even acknowledge how much it matters. What about her art portfolio? Nicole asks carefully. You know, the one she's been working on for that gallery submission? My hand freezes halfway to wiping up the spilled coffee. What about it? Sky. Nicole's voice carries a warning. Don't. But I'm already thinking about it. Reagan's portfolio. Her precious collection of original artwork that she's been cultivating for years. The one she needs for her upcoming gallery submission. The opportunity she won't shut up about. She keeps it in her studio apartment. I say, more to myself than Nicole. Right next to her easel. Skylar, listen to yourself. Nicole reaches across the table, grabbing my hand. This isn't going to make you feel better. My phone buzzes. A text from Reagan. Hope you're done with your tantrum. BTW found some pages that might be salvageable. Want them? The casual tone, the dismissiveness, it makes my blood boil. I stand up abruptly, grabbing my keys. Where are you going? Nicole asks, though I can tell from her face she already knows. Reagan has spare keys to my house. I have spare keys to her apartment. Don't do this, Nicole pleads. At least talk to Gerald first. Gerald will try to talk me out of it, I say, already heading for the door. Just like you are. Because we love you, she calls after me. Because this isn't who you are. But maybe it is. Maybe this is exactly who I become when someone destroys something irreplaceable. I drive to Reagan's apartment building, my hands steady on the wheel despite the chaos in my mind. The spare key slides into her lock like destiny. Her apartment smells like paint and coffee, that artistic mess she's always been so proud of. The portfolio sits exactly where I knew it would be, leather-bound and pristine beside her workspace. I pick it up, feeling its weight. Years of work, countless hours of dedication, her ticket to the career she's always wanted. My phone rings. It's Gerald. Nicole called me. He says when I answer. Where are you? Running errands. Skylar. His voice softens. Baby, I know you're hurting, but whatever you're thinking of doing... She didn't just destroy books, Gerald. I interrupt, my voice trembling. She destroyed memories. Notes Mom wrote to us. The margin comments she made when she was going through chemo. The bookmark I made her in 3rd grade that she kept in Little Women for 20 years. I know, he says gently. But, no buts. She needs to understand what it feels like. I hang up before he can respond, then turn my phone off completely. The portfolio feels heavy in my hands as I carry it to Reagan's small balcony. There's a metal trash can out here where she burns her failed sketches. How fitting. I'm about to open the portfolio when I hear keys in the door. My heart stops. Hello? Reagan's voice calls out. Someone here? I freeze, portfolio in hand, caught between fight and flight. She appears in the doorway to the balcony, and time seems to stop. Her eyes move from my face to the portfolio in my hands, and I watch understanding dawn in her expression. Don't, she whispers, all her usual bravado gone. Skylar, please, that's my whole future. My books were my whole past, I reply, my voice steady despite the trembling in my chest. I said I was sorry. No, I correct her. You said I was being dramatic. You said they were just books. Because I didn't know what else to say. She takes a step forward, hands raised like she's approaching a wild animal. I felt so horrible. I couldn't face how badly I'd screwed up. Please, Unsky, don't do this. For a moment, I waver. Then I remember the ashes, the lost memories. Mom's handwriting turned to dust. Maybe you should have thought about consequences before you brought a candle into an attic full of irreplaceable books. I open the portfolio, and Reagan makes a sound I've never heard before, something between a gasp and a sob. Sky, she pleads one last time. Don't. But I'm already reaching for the matches she keeps by her trash can, my hand steady, my heart thundering in my chest. The match flares to life between my fingers, its small flame dancing in the afternoon breeze. Reagan lunges forward, but I step back, holding her portfolio over the trash can. Stay back, I warn, my voice surprisingly calm. Those pieces took me years, she says, tears streaming down her face. Please, just look at them first. Just look. Maybe it's the desperation in her voice, or maybe it's my own curiosity, but I find myself opening the portfolio. The first piece catches me off guard. It's a watercolor of Mom in her garden, laughing as she tends to her roses. The detail is incredible. Reagan even captured the small scar on Mom's hand from when she fell off her bike as a kid. When did you paint this? I ask, my voice barely a whisper. Last year. I used that old photo from the summer before. She doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't have to. I flip to the next page, the match burning closer to my fingers. It's a series of sketches. Mom reading in her favorite armchair, surrounded by her beloved books. My throat tightens. You never showed me these. I was going to, Reagan says, taking a cautious step forward. I wanted them to be perfect first. The gallery submission. It's for a special exhibition. Legacy is the theme. The match burns my fingers and I drop it, letting it extinguish on the concrete. Reagan flinches but doesn't move. I turn another page and freeze. It's me, sitting cross-legged on Mom's hospital bed, reading Pride and Prejudice aloud while Mom sleeps. The details are painful in their accuracy. The dark circles under my eyes. The way Mom's hand rests on top of mine. The IV line snaking across the page. I sketched that from memory. Reagan says quietly. That last week, when you practically lived at the hospital, I'd come in the evenings and find you reading to her, even when she was too tired to stay awake. My hands start shaking. Stop it. The books weren't just your connection to Mom, Sky. I saw how much they meant to you both. That's why... She chokes back a sob. That's why I started this project. I wanted to capture those moments, preserve them somehow. I pull out another piece. This one's different. It's the beginning of what looks like a children's book with whimsical illustrations of two little girls discovering magic in their mother's library. What's this? Reagan's voice gets even quieter. I found Mom's old journal in one of the books before the accident. She'd written down story ideas, little tales about two sisters who found adventure in books. I thought maybe we could bring them to life. The matchbook falls from my other hand. You were going to tell me about this when? At the gallery opening. I wanted it to be a surprise. I thought maybe we could work on it together, make it into something real. I look down at the portfolio in my hands, really seeing it now. It's not just Reagan's art. It's our mother's legacy, transformed through her daughter's eyes. And I was about to destroy it. Just like... Oh God. I whisper, suddenly feeling sick. I was going to... But you didn't, Reagan says, finally closing the distance between us. She gently takes the portfolio from my hands. You stopped. You looked. That's more than I did with the books. I just rushed in, thinking I knew better, not even considering. I wanted to hurt you, I admit, my voice breaking. I wanted you to feel what I felt. I know. She sets the portfolio aside and, to my surprise, pulls me into a hug. I deserve it. What I did, it wasn't just careless, it was cruel. Even if I didn't mean it to be. I stand stiff in her embrace for a moment before collapsing against her, tears finally breaking free. I miss her so much. Me too, she whispers, her own tears falling into my hair. Every day. We stay like that for a long time, crying together on her balcony while the afternoon sun casts long shadows around us. Finally, I pull back, wiping my eyes. Show me more? I ask, gesturing to the portfolio. The children's book especially. I want to see what Mom was thinking. Reagan's face lights up with cautious hope. Really? You'd want to work on it together? Maybe, I say, surprising myself with how much I mean it. But first, you have to tell me everything you remember about Mom's notes. Every single detail. I will, she promises. But Sky, I really am sorry about the books. I know sorry doesn't fix it, but... No, I interrupt. It doesn't fix it. And we're going to have to talk about that. Really talk about it. But right now, I pick up the children's book sketches again, studying the joyful faces of the two sisters on the page. Right now, I want to hear about this story. The Adventures of the Book Sisters, I read aloud from Reagan's preliminary sketches. We're sitting on her living room floor, surrounded by art supplies and coffee mugs. That was Mom's working title? Yeah, Reagan says, pulling out more sketches. Look at this part. It's based on that time you convinced me there was a fairy living in the library's reference section. The illustration shows two girls, unmistakably us, peering behind encyclopedias with flashlights. The detail is incredible, right down to my missing front tooth and Reagan's unruly pigtails. My phone buzzes again. Probably Gerald or Nicole checking in, but I ignore it. Here's the weird thing, Reagan continues, pulling out a weathered notebook. I found this in Mom's copy of Little Women right before... She swallows hard. Well, you know, it's full of story notes, but look at the date. I take the notebook, my heart catching at Mom's familiar handwriting. The date shows 2 weeks before she died. She was writing this in the hospital? Reagan nods. Between treatments, the nurses said it kept her focused, gave her something to look forward to. I flip through the pages, each one filled with story ideas and character notes. Why didn't you tell me about this sooner? I wanted to illustrate it first. Make it perfect. I thought... She hesitates. I thought maybe it could heal something between us. We've been so distant since Mom died. Before I can respond, there's a knock at the door. Reagan opens it to find Nicole and Gerald standing there, both looking worried. You weren't answering your phones, Gerald says, stepping inside. His eyes dart between Reagan and me, clearly checking for signs of warfare. Nicole follows, her gaze landing on the portfolio and matches still sitting on the balcony. Oh God, did you... No, I interrupt. I didn't. I hold up Mom's notebook. But I found something else instead. They join us on the floor as Reagan and I explain about Mom's secret project. Nicole picks up one of the sketches, her eyes widening. This is incredible, Reagan. The way you've captured your mom's spirit. Show them the scene with the magical bookshelf, I suggest, surprising myself with my enthusiasm. As Reagan flips through her artwork, Gerald squeezes my hand. You okay? He whispers. Not really, I admit quietly. But maybe getting there. Wait. Nicole interrupts, pointing at something in Mom's notebook. What's this part about a hidden dedication? Reagan freezes. Oh, that's nothing. But I've already snatched the notebook, reading the passage Nicole pointed out. My hands start shaking. To my Skylar, I read aloud, who taught her little sister to love stories as much as I do. You were always the keeper of our family's tales, my darling girl. I hope this book shows you how much that meant to me. The room goes silent. I look up at Reagan, who won't meet my eyes. You knew about this dedication? My voice comes out harder than I intended. All this time? I found it the day before the accident, Reagan admits. I was going to show you, but then I got caught up trying to clear space in the attic for my art supplies, and the candle... She trails off, tears forming in her eyes. So you knew exactly what those books meant to me when you burned them. The earlier piece evaporates like smoke. You knew Mom had left me a message, and you still. It wasn't on purpose. Reagan stands up, knocking over her coffee. God, Sky, do you really think I deliberately destroy Mom's last words to you? To us? I don't know what to think anymore. I'm on my feet, too, the notebook clutched to my chest. You kept this from me for weeks. Because I was trying to make it right. I thought if I could finish the illustrations, make the book real, it wouldn't bring back what you destroyed. Gerald steps between us. Hey, maybe we should all take a breath. No, I cut him off, backing toward the door. I need to not be here right now. Skylar, wait. Reagan pleads, reaching for me. Please, just let me explain. But I'm already gone, running down the stairs, Mom's notebook still pressed against my heart like a shield. I can hear footsteps behind me, probably Gerald, but I don't stop. I make it to my car before the tears start, hot and angry and confused. The notebook falls open in my lap, and Mom's words blur before my eyes. You were always the keeper of our family's tales. Not anymore, Mom. Those tales are ashes now, and I don't know how to tell stories without them. My phone buzzes with a text from Reagan. I never meant to keep secrets. I just wanted to give you back what I took away. Please come back so we can talk. I start the car instead, watching in my rearview mirror as Gerald and Nicole emerge from the building. They stand there, watching me drive away, looking as lost as I feel. I find myself parked outside Daisy's house without consciously deciding to come here. She opens the door before I can even knock, as if she's been expecting me. Nicole called, she explains, pulling me into a hug that smells like cinnamon and home. Come in, honey. I just made tea. Daisy has been our surrogate mother since Mom died. She was Mom's best friend for 30 years, and now she's the closest thing we have to a parent. I almost burned Reagan's portfolio, I blurt out as she guides me to her kitchen table. I know. She sets a steaming mug in front of me. And I also know you didn't. But I wanted to. My hands wrap around the warm ceramic. What kind of person does that make me? It makes you human. Daisy sits across from me, her kind eyes studying my face. Your mother would understand that better than anyone. What do you mean? Did Reagan ever tell you why your mom started collecting those books in the first place? I shake my head. They belonged to her sister, Amanda. Every single one of them. Mom didn't have a sister, I say automatically. Daisy's smile is sad. She did. Amanda died when your mom was 20. Car accident. Their parents had already passed, and Amanda's books were all your mom had left of her. My hands start shaking so badly that tea sloshes over the rim of my mug. Why didn't she ever tell us? Because Amanda's death nearly destroyed her. She spent years angry, bitter, pushing everyone away. Until one day, she decided to honor Amanda's memory instead of letting grief consume her. Daisy reaches across the table, covering my hand with hers. That's when she started writing stories in the margins, adding her own life to her sister's books, making them live again. And now they're gone too, I whisper. Yes, Daisy agrees. But look what's rising from those ashes. Reagan's art, your mother's stories, this children's book you two could create together. My phone buzzes again. Another text from Reagan. Found more of Mom's notes. There's a whole chapter about the time we turned the living room into a blanket fortress library. Remember that? Despite everything, I smile. I was 12, Reagan was 9, and we spent an entire rainy Saturday reading under blankets strung between chairs. Reagan's trying so hard, Daisy says gently. Maybe too hard in that clumsy way she's always had, but she's trying. She kept Mom's dedication secret, I argue, but my voice lacks conviction. Did she? Or was she trying to transform it into something beautiful first? Daisy stands, walking to her bookshelf. Your mother gave me something just before she died. I think it's time you had it. She returns with a small leather-bound journal. She asked me to give this to you both when the time was right. When you were ready to read it together. I open it with trembling fingers. The first page reads, To my beautiful girls. May you always find your way back to each other through stories, just like I found my way back to Amanda through her books. My vision blurs. I don't know how to fix this, Daisy. Don't you? She taps the journal. Your mother left you a map. Both of you. My phone buzzes one more time. Reagan again. I found Mom's old Polaroid camera in my closet. Remember how she used to document every blanket fortress we built? I have all the photos. Come back, please. We can look at them together. Daisy squeezes my shoulder. Sometimes the hardest stories to tell are the ones we need to hear most. I stand up, clutching Mom's journal. I need to go. I know. Daisy smiles. Tell Reagan I expect both of you for Sunday dinner. No excuses. The drive back to Reagan's apartment feels different this time. Instead of anger, I feel something else. A mix of hope and fear and possibility. I find Reagan sitting on her floor, surrounded by old Polaroids. She looks up when I enter, her eyes red but hopeful. You came back, she says softly. I hold up Mom's journal. Daisy had this. Mom wanted us to read it together. Reagan's eyes widen. Is that her story journal? The real one? I sit down beside her, picking up one of the Polaroids. Two little girls, gap-toothed and grinning, surrounded by books and blankets. Tell me about the chapter you're working on. The blanket fortress one. Really? When I nod, she reaches for her sketchbook. Well, I thought we could start with this scene here, where you're teaching me how to do different voices for each character. As she talks, her pencil moving across the page, I feel something shift inside me. Like a new story beginning to take shape. One written in both our voices this time. Read that part again, I say, pointing to a passage in Mom's journal. Reagan and I are sprawled on her living room floor, where we've been for hours, surrounded by sketches and memories. The girls never knew, Reagan reads, but watching them build their blanket fortresses reminded me so much of Amanda and me. Sky has her aunt's way of making stories come alive, while Reagan... She pauses, her voice catching. Go on, I encourage softly. While Reagan has her fierce creativity, just like I did at her age. Sometimes I watch them together and see myself and Amanda getting lost in our own little world of books and imagination. I can't believe she never told us about Amanda, I say, picking up one of Reagan's sketches. Two girls in a blanket fortress, one reading aloud while the other draws. Maybe it hurt too much. Reagan adds another detail to the sketch. Like how we barely talk about Mom. The truth of that statement hits hard. When did we stop talking about her? Probably around the time I started getting those gallery interviews and you got engaged to Gerald. Reagan sets down her pencil. It was easier to focus on the future than deal with the past. Until you burned it down, I say, but there's no heat in my words anymore. Yeah. Reagan meets my eyes. I really was trying to make space for my art supplies, you know. I thought if I could just get organized, finally make something of myself like you have. What are you talking about? I'm a middle school English teacher. Who's already department head at 28. Meanwhile, I'm still struggling to get my first gallery showing, living in a cramped studio, barely making rent. Is that what you think? I sit up straighter. Reagan, I've been jealous of your freedom for years. You're pursuing your dreams while I'm stuck following some safe, predictable path. Safe? Reagan laughs incredulously. You're changing kids' lives. Just last week you were telling me about that student who finally discovered reading through your creative writing class. That's different. No, it's not. You're doing exactly what Mom did, making stories come alive for people. Before I can respond, there's a knock at the door. It's Gerald and Nicole carrying takeout bags. We figured you two might be hungry, Nicole says, setting Chinese food containers on the coffee table. And we brought reinforcements, Gerald adds, pulling out a bottle of wine. As they set up dinner, Reagan shows them our progress on the children's book concept. Nicole gasps at the illustrations while Gerald reads passages from Mom's journal. Listen to this, he says. The girls don't realize it yet, but they're each other's best story, the one that keeps writing itself chapter after chapter. She really saw us clearly, didn't she? Reagan says quietly. Maybe more clearly than we saw ourselves, I admit. Nicole picks up one of the sketches. This is incredible, you two. Have you thought about actually publishing it? Reagan and I exchange looks. We've barely started, I begin. But you have all the pieces, Nicole interrupts. Mom's story notes, Reagan's illustrations, your teaching experience with children's literature. Plus, Gerald adds, I might know someone. My cousin works in children's publishing. I could make a call. Wait, I hold up my hand. Are we actually considering this? Reagan bites her lip. Would you want to? Work on it together, I mean. I look around at the scattered evidence of our shared history. Mom's journal, Reagan's art, old photos, half-eaten Chinese food. I think Mom would have loved it. That's not what I asked, Reagan says softly. Would you want to? Our eyes meet, and suddenly I'm remembering all those nights in our blanket fortresses, all the stories we created together before life and loss drove us apart. Yes, I say finally, but we do it right. We take our time. We honor her memory properly. And we talk about her, Reagan adds. No more avoiding the hard stuff. Deal. I reach for Mom's journal. Should we start with the chapter about the magical library cards? Reagan grabs her sketchbook, already smiling. Only if we include the part where you convinced me they could grant wishes if we shelved enough books. Oh God, I remember that. Nicole laughs. Didn't you end up reorganizing the entire school library? And got in trouble because we used our own system instead of Dewey Decimal. I grin. As Reagan starts sketching and I begin reading aloud from Mom's notes, I feel something settle into place. Like finding the right word in a sentence, or the perfect color in a painting. We're not okay yet, not completely, but we're writing a new chapter together. And somewhere, I think Mom is watching us build this new kind of fortress, one made of memories and hope instead of blankets and chairs. The publisher wants to see us next week, I announce, bursting into Reagan's apartment with my laptop. They love the concept. Reagan looks up from her drawing table, charcoal smudged across her cheek. Seriously? Already? Gerald's cousin showed them the preliminary sketches and Mom's story outline. They're calling it fresh and emotionally resonant. I set my laptop down, pulling up the email. They want to meet us both. Both of us? Reagan's voice carries a hint of anxiety. But you're the writer. And you're the artist. We're doing this together, remember? She nods, but I can see the tension in her shoulders. Walking over to her drawing table, I peek at what she's working on. It's the scene where the sisters discover their mother's magical bookmark. This is beautiful, I say, touching the corner of the page. You captured Mom's smile perfectly. Thanks, but... Reagan hesitates. I've been thinking about something. About that day with the books. My stomach tightens. What about it? I lied. She sets down her charcoal, finally meeting my eyes. The candle didn't just tip over. I was angry that day. Angry because I'd found Mom's notes about you being the keeper of stories. I felt left out, I guess. When I brought the candle up there, part of me was being careless on purpose. The silence that follows feels heavy enough to crush us both. Say something, Reagan whispers. I need air. I turn toward her small balcony, my hands shaking as I slide the door open. Reagan follows me out. I understand if you want to stop the project. Stop? I whirl around. You think that's what this is about? Isn't it? I just admitted I partially destroyed Mom's books on purpose. No, I say, surprising us both with my calm. You just finally told me the truth. Do you know how long I've been waiting for that? She blinks. What? I knew, Reagan. Maybe not consciously, but I knew it wasn't just an accident. That's why I wanted to burn your portfolio so badly. Because somewhere deep down, I recognized the intention behind what you did. Oh, God. She sinks into one of her balcony chairs. We're really messed up, aren't we? A laugh bubbles up from somewhere inside me. Slightly hysterical, but genuine. Yeah, we are. But you know what? So was Mom. What do you mean? I pull out Mom's journal from my bag. Listen to this entry. After Amanda died, I burned all her letters in a fit of rage. I thought it would help me let go, but it only made me hold on tighter. It took me years to understand that destroying memories doesn't erase the pain. It just creates new wounds. Reagan's eyes fill with tears. She never told us any of this. No, but she left us the story. And now, I gesture to her drawing table inside, visible through the glass door. Now we're turning it into something new. My phone rings. It's Gerald's cousin from the publishing house. Hello? I put it on speaker. Skylar? Is Reagan with you? I wanted to talk about moving up the meeting. We're really excited about this project, especially the parallel between your mother's story and the contemporary narrative you're creating. Reagan and I exchange looks. Actually, I say, we have a slightly different angle we'd like to pitch. It's about 3 generations of sisters and the stories that both break and heal them. I'm listening, the publisher says. It's about Mom and Amanda, too. Reagan adds quickly, about how some stories need to be burned before they can be reborn. There's a pause on the other end. Send me what you have. All of it. I want to see this new direction immediately. After we hang up, Reagan turns to me. Are we crazy? Changing everything this close to the meeting? Maybe. I pick up her charcoal, hand it to her. But I think this is the story Mom always wanted us to tell. We just needed to go through our own fire first to understand it. Reagan takes the charcoal, a small smile forming. Where should we start? With the truth, I say, opening Mom's journal to a fresh page. All of it. The ugly parts. The beautiful parts. The parts that hurt too much to look at directly. Like how I almost destroyed everything because I was jealous. And how I almost did the same thing right back. I squeeze her hand. But maybe that's the point. Maybe some stories need to be broken before they can be put back together. Reagan picks up her sketchbook, flips to a new page. Then let's break it right this time. Together. As she begins to draw and I start writing, I feel Mom's presence stronger than ever. Not in the ashes of her books, but in the new story taking shape between her daughters. Ready? Reagan asks, squeezing my hand as we stand outside the bookstore. Through the window, I can see the crowd gathering for our launch event. Familiar faces mixed with strangers, all waiting to hear our story. Almost. I pull out Mom's journal, now worn and paint-stained from countless hours of use. One last tradition? Reagan smiles, knowing exactly what I mean. We find a quiet corner by the store's entrance and sit cross-legged on the ground, just like we used to do in our blanket fortresses. Dear Mom, I begin, writing in the journal's final blank pages. Today we're sharing your story. All of it. The parts you told us, the parts you kept hidden, and the parts we had to discover on our own. Reagan takes the pen. We included Amanda too. She writes, your sister deserved to be part of this story, just like we finally learned to be part of each other's. Daisy appears around the corner, carrying what looks like an old cardboard box. Found something you girls might want to see before you go in. Inside the box are dozens of preserved book pages, slightly singed around the edges but intact. I salvaged what I could from the attic that day, Daisy explains. Been waiting for the right moment to show you. My hands shake as I lift out a page from Pride and Prejudice with Mom's familiar handwriting in the margins. You kept these all this time? Sometimes broken things need to be broken, Daisy says, echoing Mom's words from her journal. But that doesn't mean we can't save pieces of them. Reagan pulls out another page. It's from Little Women, with a sketch Mom had drawn of 2 girls reading. Look at the date, she whispers. This was right after Amanda died. She was always telling stories. Daisy smiles. Even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. Nicole pokes her head out the bookstore door. They're ready for you two. Gerald's already doing damage control with the publisher. Apparently having the authors sitting on the sidewalk isn't standard protocol. We laugh, gathering our things. Before we head in, Reagan grabs my arm. Sky? Thank you for not burning my portfolio that day. Thank you for finally telling me the truth about the books. And thank you both. Daisy adds, forgiving your mother's story the ending she always wanted. Her girls finding their way back to each other. Inside, the crowd hushes as we take our places at the reading table. Our book, The Library of Lost Sisters, sits between us, its cover showing 3 pairs of sisters across 3 generations, surrounded by books and art and magic. Gerald gives us a thumbs up from the back as I open to the first page. Reagan's illustrations seem to come alive under the bookstore lights. Mom and Amanda as young girls, then Reagan and me, all of us connected by the stories we tell and the ones we keep. Once upon a time, I begin, my voice steady. There were 2 sisters who thought they knew everything about their mother's stories. But sometimes the best stories are hidden in the margins, waiting to be discovered. Reagan picks up the narrative, pointing to her illustrations as she goes. The crowd leans in, caught up in our tale of loss and redemption, of sisters and secrets, of destruction and creation. When we finish reading, a little girl raises her hand. Did you really almost burn each other's stuff? We did, Reagan admits, because sometimes when we're hurting, we want others to hurt too. But then what happened? I share a look with my sister. Then we remembered something our mom taught us, that every ending can be a beginning, if you're brave enough to write it that way. The signing line forms, and as we autograph copies, I notice Reagan adding tiny sketches alongside her signature, little blanket fortresses and magical books, each one unique. A woman reaches the table with tears in her eyes. I lost my sister last year, she says. This book, it's helping me remember her the right way. That's exactly what Mom would have wanted, Reagan tells her softly. As the event winds down, I find myself holding our book, running my fingers over the dedication page. For Mom, who taught us that the best stories never really end. They just keep being retold in new ways. And for Amanda, the aunt we never knew but whose spirit lived in every book on our mother's shelves. Your stories live on in us. Reagan joins me, resting her head on my shoulder. Think they're proud of us? I know they are, Daisy says, appearing with the box of saved pages. Now, what do you say we take these home and add them to your next story? Looking at my sister, really looking at her, I see Mom's creativity and Amanda's passion for stories, all mixed together with Reagan's own fierce spirit. We may have lost some pieces of our past, but we've built something new from the ashes. Something that feels like both an ending and a beginning. Yes, I say, taking Reagan's hand. Let's write the next chapter together.
I am Samantha, a 35-year-old woman. I am blissfully married to my beloved husband, Douglas, and together we share a serene and delightful life with our 7-year-old son, Joseph, and our 4-year-old daughter, Christina. Douglas and I first met in the university cafeteria during our college days. Each of us was enjoying a cup of coffee with a book in hand when a spontaneous conversation sparked a deep and meaningful connection. Douglas, ever so calm and considerate, would attentively listen to my tales with a gentle patience that felt comforting. Over time, our friendship blossomed and evolved, and I came to realize that his presence in my life had become absolutely irreplaceable. His marriage proposal was beautifully simple. Beneath a canopy of beautifully blossoming trees, he shyly presented a ring and lovingly declared, "I want to be with you forever." His sincere words were all I needed to instantly agree with a nod, filled with deep emotion. Since that momentous day when we exchanged vows, we have found true happiness in our marriage. When our son Joseph was born, Douglas, with tears of joy cascading down his cheeks, tenderly murmured, "He's our treasure." Joseph is a vivacious and inquisitively spirited child who thrives outdoors. Every weekend, we embark on delightful family picnics, and observing him energetically run around fills my heart with an immense sense of joy and fulfillment. Soon after, we welcomed Christina into our lives. She was a bit delicate, diagnosed with a congenital condition from birth. Initially, our concerns were significant, but Douglas and I joined forces and committed to support her at every challenging step. Joseph, her protective older brother, cherishes his sister deeply and often says, "I will protect Christina." Witnessing their growth and bond develop has been the pinnacle of my joy. Another individual holds an extraordinarily special place in my heart, my grandmother, Helen. She is the epitome of grace and warmth, qualities I have admired and loved since my childhood. My mother, Kathy, divorced my father when I was quite young and swiftly remarried a man named Michael, with whom she had my half-sister, Ashley. As my mother immersed herself in her new family, I gradually felt that I was becoming an afterthought. While my mother and stepfather lavished Ashley with love and attention, I often felt overlooked and neglected. During family shopping trips, Ashley would frequently receive new shoes, whereas I was reminded, the ones you have are still perfectly fine. However, my grandmother Helen always treated me differently. She would envelop me in her warm embraces and reassuringly say, "Samantha, you are my precious granddaughter." Whenever loneliness crept in, I found solace and comfort at her welcoming home. The affection I yearned for from my mother was seldom received, making my grandmother's presence a sanctuary for my heart. On significant occasions like my wedding and the births of my children, my parents and stepsister displayed minimal interest in my life. My wedding seemed more of a duty for my mother and Michael than a celebration. They attended out of obligation, rather than genuine desire to participate. My mother offered no comments on my wedding arrangements or my choice of dress, leaving me feeling as if my dreams and aspirations were dissolving into thin air, resulting in a lingering emptiness after the ceremony. When Joseph was born, my mother prioritized Ashley, bringing her to the hospital immediately after I gave birth. Yet her interest in my newborn was notably scant. Ashley's inquiries about the baby seemed driven by mere curiosity, her gaze detached and indifferent. I desperately longed for my mother to genuinely see and love my child, yet her focus remained fixed on Ashley, which rendered me feeling incredibly isolated and lonely within my own family. My mother, Ashley, and Michael appeared to form an impenetrable unit, leaving me feeling like an outsider, despite my deep affection and support for them. Coming to terms with this reality was challenging for me. I reflected on this situation repeatedly but could never fully reconcile these feelings. Eventually, I began to distance myself and view my familial relationships from a broader perspective. Nevertheless, my grandmother Helen was thrilled when I informed her of my decision to marry. When I shared the news, she wept tears of joy and exclaimed, "Congratulations, you made a wonderful choice." Her heartfelt words warmed me to my core and nearly brought me to tears myself. Helen sincerely wished for my happiness, which moved me and imprinted her kindness onto my soul. When I introduced Douglas to her for the first time, she greeted him warmly. Sensing his slight nervousness, she grasped his hand firmly and repeatedly urged him, "Please take good care of Samantha. I'm counting on you." Douglas, touched by her words, responded with a shy smile and expressed his profound gratitude. At that moment, I felt just how much my grandmother cherished me and the immense trust she placed in Douglas. When Joseph and Christina were born, her joy was boundless, far exceeding all my expectations. She adored our children profoundly. When Joseph took his first steps, Helen, with tears of happiness streaming down her face, jubilantly exclaimed, "Look, he can walk now." Whenever Christina offered a smile, Helen was utterly enchanted, often remarking joyfully, "Christina is starting to look like her mama." For my children, Helen was not merely a great-grandmother, she was a boundless source of unconditional love. For me, her enduring warmth and affection have been a foundational pillar of support, providing me with strength and courage through all of life's challenges. Helen harbored a deep love for Hawaii, and her home was adorned with vibrant Hawaiian paintings and ornaments which infused every room with a peaceful, tropical ambience. After the early loss of my grandfather, she chose to live independently, cherishing the memories they shared. In honor of their cherished past, she utilized the inheritance to purchase a cottage in Hawaii, a place imbued with their treasured memories which held special significance to her. The charming cottage stood majestically along the pristine beachfront, serving as a haven of peace and tranquility with each visit. After marrying, I frequently brought my family to stay at the cottage, alongside my beloved grandmother Helen. Known for her culinary prowess, Helen's lemon pie was particularly exceptional, its flavor unrivaled. Standing by her side in the kitchen, enveloped in the delightful aromas of sugar and butter, remains one of my most cherished memories. Douglas was equally enchanted by the serene ambience, often commenting with a contented smile, "This place is like heaven." Joseph joyfully sprinted along the sandy shores, while Christina adored sitting on Helen's lap, captivated by her enthralling stories. Helen's profound affection for my family was unmistakable. When she confided in me, "I plan to leave this cottage to you," my heart swelled with joy. The cottage was a repository of precious memories, and I envisioned creating similarly warm memories for my children. However, these blissful days were overshadowed when Helen fell gravely ill. I devoted myself to caring for her, but managing Christina's health complexities simultaneously proved to be a formidable challenge. Unbeknownst to me during this tumultuous period, my mother Kathy and stepfather Michael feigned concern for Helen while covertly plotting to claim her estate. The depth of my grief was profound when Helen passed away, but the revelation in her will shocked me even more. Helen had bequeathed not only the Hawaiian cottage, but also a substantial sum of money to me. Upon discovering this, tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. It felt as though I could hear Helen's voice gently saying, "Samantha, the cottage and everything else are for you and your family." However, my mother and stepfather vehemently disagreed. They argued that it was unjust for me to inherit everything and strongly suggested that I transfer ownership of the cottage to Helen's brother, Thomas. I wanted to say no, but at that time, I was physically and mentally exhausted from caring for Christina and her medical expenses. I didn't have the energy to argue. Reluctantly, I succumbed to their pressure and handed the keys to Thomas, stating calmly, "We'll handle the paperwork when things settle down." The loss of Helen's cherished cottage was painful, yet I compelled myself to focus solely on Christina. After all, with my husband and children by my side, I felt I had sufficient joy in my life. Several weeks following Helen's passing, an unexpected disaster struck. Although there had been reports of an approaching hurricane days prior, the sheer magnitude of devastation it brought to our region was unforeseen. The storm's ferocity surpassed all expectations, engulfing the town in torrential rains and widespread flooding. On that fateful day, I remained home with Christina, whose frailty made her particularly vulnerable to the abrupt weather changes. So we stayed indoors to monitor the evolving situation. Meanwhile, Douglas and Joseph ventured to a nearby supermarket to procure supplies. Despite the streets beginning to flood, Douglas assured with a lighthearted, "We'll be back soon," while Joseph cheerfully promised, "I'll buy some snacks Christina likes." As they waved goodbye, little did I know those would be their final words. On their way back, they tried to cross a flooded road. At that moment, a surge of water swept their car away. When I heard about the accident on the news, I felt as if all the blood had drained from my body. I couldn't believe it, or perhaps I didn't want to believe it. In a state of panic, I rushed to the police station, frantically pleading for them to find Douglas and Joseph. However, after agonizing hours, a police officer solemnly shook his head and whispered, "I'm sorry." Douglas and Joseph were tragically lost to the floodwaters. My world shattered in an instant. Consumed by grief so intense it felt suffocating, I wept inconsolably. Christina was crying too, but I told myself I had to stay composed for her. Yet the depth of my loss felt immeasurable. There was much to be done, such as arranging the funeral. I set the date, contacted family and friends, and began preparing to say goodbye to Douglas and Joseph. Amidst this, I also informed my mother of the tragedy. Over the phone, after a moment of silence, she responded indifferently, "That's unfortunate." "When is the funeral?" she asked. "Next Saturday," I replied. "I can't make it," she said. "Why?" "I have plans to go to Hawaii." "You know Ashley recently lost her job and broke up with her boyfriend, right? So Michael and I planned a trip to cheer her up. It's been scheduled for a while, and it's difficult to cancel now." Her words were incomprehensible to me. Prioritizing a vacation over mourning the loss of her son-in-law and grandson? "Mom, are you serious?" I asked in a trembling voice. "Samantha, we can't just change our plans. Ashley is looking forward to this. Family died. Douglas and Joseph. And you're prioritizing a trip? Don't overreact, Samantha. I understand how you feel, but we have our plans." Speechless and heartbroken, I realized she had chosen a Hawaiian vacation for Ashley over attending the funeral of her son-in-law and grandson. Mixed with anger and profound sorrow, I ended the phone call, feeling a deep sense of betrayal and isolation. I was in disbelief. My mother had always shown a preference for Ashley over me, yet I had never imagined she could be so utterly heartless. On the somber day of the funeral, as I tried valiantly to suppress my tears, I tenderly placed Douglas and Joseph's favorite flowers atop their caskets, offering a silent, poignant farewell. The ceremony saw a considerable turnout, including many friends and relatives of Douglas, which provided a small comfort. Remarkably, even my estranged father and his side of the family, whom I had not seen for many years, made the effort to attend. Their presence and shared expressions of grief brought a slight solace amidst the overwhelming sorrow. In stark contrast, my mother, stepfather, and stepsister were conspicuously absent. They were already at the airport. I knew it instinctively. The image of them waiting in the airport lobby, laughing carelessly as they anticipated their flight, ignited a fury within me that was hard to contain. Such callousness was simply unforgivable. Engulfed in grief over the loss of my husband and son, I also felt a simmering anger toward them brewing quietly within me. Following the funeral, I decided to check the security cameras installed at the Hawaiian cottage. Seeing them arrive there casually, as if nothing had happened, solidified my resolve. I was determined not to let them get away with their indifference. I promptly called the police and reported them for trespassing, leading to their eviction from the cottage. When the police arrived and escorted them out, they were utterly bewildered. Frantically, they claimed that the cottage was supposed to belong to my grandmother's brother, Thomas, but their claims fell on deaf ears. The officers, having been informed by me that I was the legal owner and had not authorized their stay, shared this with my family, who were visibly shocked and confused. They had no choice but to find temporary accommodation in a nearby hotel. Shortly after the eviction, my mother called me in a rage. "What have you done, Samantha? Why would you do such a thing?" Her voice was thick with anger, and for a moment I was left speechless by her audacity. I was momentarily speechless, thinking, again, she only thinks of herself. I don't understand why this would be considered trespassing. We're family. It shouldn't be a problem for us to visit. She continued vehemently. I can't believe you would do such a thing. That cottage is supposed to belong to Thomas, isn't it? My heart grew even colder. In her words, I felt the overlap of my past pain and betrayal. She continued to assert her rights without acknowledging their wrongdoing. The last vestiges of warmth in my heart slowly solidified into ice. "Mom, please calm down and listen," I said calmly. "When you entered that cottage, I hadn't yet completed the legal paperwork. That means the cottage was still legally mine. I didn't know that. It's unbelievable that you would accuse your own family of trespassing. Do you know how much the hotel cost?" Her voice was still full of anger. "How could you do this? We're family." Despite her escalating anger, I held my ground. If we truly were family, then attending your son-in-law and grandson's funeral should have been your priority. I don't consider people who skip such a crucial family event as part of my family." This left her momentarily at a loss for words, but I seized the opportunity to express all the frustration and anger I had been holding back. "I no longer consider you family," I declared firmly, and ended the call. In the aftermath, I learned that my mother's stepfather and stepsister cut their trip short and returned home earlier than intended. They had probably planned to stay at the cottage for several days, but now faced unexpected financial burdens due to the situation. Naturally, it seemed fitting that they experience some financial difficulties. Despite their return, my mother continued to aggressively blame me for the situation. Regardless of her indifference and betrayal, she insisted on portraying me as the one at fault. "You really did something terrible by betraying your own family," she repeatedly messaged me. I chose to ignore her messages, and over time, her words lost any impact on me. My heart had completely cooled towards them. Douglas had always been the primary breadwinner, providing a stable and comfortable lifestyle for our family. Over the years, I had consistently sent financial support to my parents, especially since my mother frequently requested assistance, and my stepfather often demanded financial help. Deep down, I never felt obligated to send them money. It was more about the expectation that I should support them. But after the loss of Douglas and Joseph, and particularly with my mother's glaring absence at the funeral, my resentment towards her reached its peak. Her decision to prioritize a leisure trip to Hawaii over mourning with her family was an unforgivable betrayal that left my heart ice cold. As a result, I decided to cease all financial support to them. The following month, when my mother realized the financial support had stopped, she called me in a panic. Every time the phone rang, a wave of disturbance washed over me, but I managed to maintain my composure. "Why haven't you sent the money? What do you mean by this?" she demanded over the phone. With a deep, steadying breath, I responded quietly but firmly, "I will no longer be sending you any financial support." After a stunned silence, my mother objected vehemently. "Why would you do this? You know we rely on your support. How are we supposed to live if you don't help us?" Her voice was filled with desperation and anger. At that moment, I realized I had fully come to terms with my decision. No matter how upset she became, I would not be swayed. "I have no intention of continuing to send money anymore. You didn't even attend the funeral. I see no reason to continue supporting people who chose to go on vacation in Hawaii rather than mourn the loss of my husband and son," I replied coldly. My mother's fury intensified at my words. "You're such a cold child. To say such heartless things without any regard for me," she exclaimed. But I was no longer affected by her words. "That's fine. I don't think there's anything more to discuss," I concluded, and hung up the phone for the last time. After ending the call, I reaffirmed my decision to have nothing more to do with these people. Afterwards, my mother and stepfather, who had been living off my support and their pensions, had to manage on just their pensions. According to relatives, Ashley, who had been fired from her job, had not found new employment and was still living at home. Their household finances were strained, even making it difficult to pay for utilities. The family that used to dine out frequently was now limited to frugal meals. My mother picked out discounted groceries with a sigh, and my stepfather struggled to find work, hindered by his age. The former liveliness was gone, replaced by a heavy silence that likely hung over their home. However, I felt no sympathy for them. I no longer felt obliged to solve their hardships. Protecting my own peace of mind was my top priority. From there, my mother and stepfather's behavior became increasingly desperate. They started showing up at my house unannounced, begging for money, and when refused, they would shout and wreak havoc. Fearing their unpredictable visits, I doubled the locks on my doors and installed security cameras. Each ring of the doorbell put me on edge, and I often pretended not to be home. I couldn't feel safe in my own house, becoming sensitive to every noise at night, which led to many sleepless nights. One day, when my mother tried to sneak into my house again, I immediately called the police. Upon their arrival, she was arrested on the spot, and the incident resulted in a criminal record for her. My mother and stepfather lost social credibility, struggled to find work due to their criminal records, and were unable to receive loans from banks. With no income, their financial difficulties worsened. Despite the severity of their ordeal, I could not find it in myself to sympathize. My heart had closed off to them. All I could do was quietly watch their betrayal. The fact that my mother and stepfather had skipped my husband and son's funeral to go on a trip to Hawaii became a major topic among relatives and was met with widespread criticism. They became distanced and isolated from everyone around them. Criticism towards her increased, and she lost support from family and friends, finding herself without anyone to rely on. Despite repeated apologies from my mother, my heart remained cold. I had no intention of accepting her apologies. I decided to look forward without dwelling on how much I had been hurt and vowed not to sacrifice myself to meet familial expectations anymore. Above all, I had something precious to protect Christina. Knowing her strength, I had to live strongly for her sake. To do this, cutting ties with my family and stopping any further financial support felt like the best course of action. With a resolve to not be bound by the past, I decided to completely separate myself from my family. Connections with my mother, stepfather, and stepsister had become meaningless to me. In my heart, my relationship with them had completely ended. I stopped all financial support and felt the weight of how much I had been compromising. From that day, I chose to proceed on my own, without relying on anyone. Christina and I moved to the Hawaiian cottage. In a room filled with warm sunlight and views of the tranquil sea, we started our new life. Christina gradually regained her strength, and as I supported her, I found new hope within myself. Now free from my family and past pains, I felt liberated. Despite the tears I had shed looking back, those tears were now for moving beyond my past, not returning to it. Sometimes, as Christina and I walked along the beach, I thought about how our difficult journey had shaped us. It made me appreciate our new life all the more. Christina, slowly reclaiming her smile, seemed to be overcoming something within herself. Since I made the decision to live strongly, our lives gradually became more peaceful, and I felt a new future unfolding for us. The end of my relationship with my family allowed me to reclaim myself. I deepened my bond with Christina and began to enjoy life again. Those moments made me truly glad I had cut ties with my family, and I looked forward to a future of freedom and renewal. Proud of being able to live looking forward, I decided to tread each step of my life firmly. My name is Naomi Reynolds. I am 35 years old, and I currently reside in a peaceful suburban area of New England. I was born to an American father and a Japanese mother. My father was employed by a prominent pharmaceutical company based in Boston. He was tasked with establishing a branch office in Japan, which is where he met my mother. 30 years ago, he decided to bring both my mother and me back to the US with him. At the time, I was just 5 years old. My mother was initially bewildered by the sudden change in environment, but my father reassured her, saying, "Here, you can receive the best education." My father was dedicated to his work, and my mother, despite being in a strange land, raised me. Gradually, both my mother and I adapted to life here. After maturing in the US and completing my academic journey, I managed to secure a position at a well-known advertising agency. Even now, after having gotten married and having a child, I continue to work. We lead a comfortable life, thanks to our efforts. My husband, Gabriel, holds the position of a senior manager at a prestigious investment bank. He is an exceptional spouse who consistently prioritizes our family above all else. We are blessed with a wonderful son named Jefferson, who is currently 7 years old and energetically attends a local public elementary school as a second grader. Although he has an allergy to eggs, Jefferson is a bright and well-mannered child, earning the affection and love of everyone around him. On the surface, our family life might appear calm and uneventful. However, beneath that serene exterior lies a more complicated reality, particularly concerning my relationship with my stepmother, Keiko. Keiko is my father's second wife. I lost my real mother when I was 10 years old, and I vividly remember that time. My mother loved flowers and would take me to botanical gardens on weekends. "Naomi, what's the name of this flower?" she would ask with a smile, a voice that still echoes in my ears. I watched helplessly as her smile was ravaged by illness and she passed away abruptly. The separation was too sudden. A year after her death, my father remarried Keiko. At that time, my father was suddenly left alone to raise me, and he was desperate. Seeing him struggle to balance work and household duties, I, as a fifth grader, tried my best to be a good child. So when he announced his remarriage to Keiko, I simply responded, "Okay, I understand," despite feeling complex emotions inside. At the time, she brought along her 12-year-old son, Akira. I later learned from my father that their meeting wasn't coincidental. Keiko had majored in English literature in Japan and worked as a high school teacher before coming to study in the US. After marrying a Japanese man she met here, they divorced a few years ago, and her ex-husband returned to Japan. Since then, she had been raising Akira alone while teaching Japanese at a language school in Boston. My father and Keiko met when he was enrolling me in the language school so that I wouldn't forget Japanese. They spoke for the first time in a classroom after school. As they were both single parents, they quickly bonded over the shared hardships of raising children alone. My father was particularly moved by Keiko's determination to live vigorously as a single mother in a foreign land. "Naomi, Keiko is truly strong. She left Japan and is living here alone, raising Akira with such determination. I am inspired by her way of life," he told me the day he decided to remarry. For Keiko, marrying my father perhaps signified a release from years of hardship. It freed her from financial worries and allowed her to provide a better education for Akira, and more importantly, it gave her hope for a happy life with a new family. Maybe her expectations were too high initially. At first, Akira and I played together often. He was fluent in Japanese and would kindly correct my poor language skills. We even shared ice cream after school. However, that relationship didn't last long. Keiko tried to treat Akira and me equally, but it was only superficial. "Naomi, have you finished your homework?" "Akira has already finished." "Akira is much more reliable, isn't he?" She would compare, slowly driving a wedge between us. My father tried desperately to forge a new family dynamic with me, Keiko, and Akira, but it was never easy. Our awkward family relationship lasted for years. Still, my father acted as a buffer, somehow maintaining our family bond. However, after his death, our relationship quickly deteriorated. The trigger may have been Akira's divorce, which had started a few months before my father passed away. Akira now lives with Keiko and his daughter, Michelle, who is 8 years old and in the same grade as Jefferson. Akira's marriage, which occurred 8 years ago, was to Erica, a woman of Japanese-American descent who worked at the same large corporation. My father and Keiko were overjoyed, believing it to be an excellent match. The wedding was held at a top-tier hotel, and Keiko proudly showed off the photos to her friends. Despite the superficial glamour, a rift developed between Akira and Erica. Erica was an ambitious career woman who wished to continue working full-time even after their daughter, Michelle, was born. However, balancing childcare and work did not go smoothly, and their marital relationship began to sour. Additionally, Akira struggled to advance in his career. Surrounded by peers who regarded his highly capable wife with high expectations, the pressure on him intensified daily. The disparity in their living standards also cornered him. Why can't you get promoted? Think about Michelle's education expenses. Such words from Erica gradually cornered Akira. One day, Akira made a significant mistake during an important presentation, causing considerable losses for his company. This event led him to decide to leave his job. However, this decision caused a definitive rift in his relationship with Erica. The divorce mediation was challenging. Ultimately, Erica, citing a lack of time for childcare, agreed that Michelle would primarily live with her father. When Akira returned to his parental home with Michelle, he had lost a considerable amount of weight and seemed like a different person, completely devoid of confidence. Keiko was heartbroken seeing her son in such a state and began taking care of him devotedly. "Akira, have you found a job?" she would ask, to which he would just reply, "Not yet." However, about 6 months later, Akira suddenly announced to his mother that he had secured a job at a major investment firm. Keiko was overjoyed and proudly shared the news with relatives. However, I felt something was off. Akira seemed unchanged from before. One day, I accidentally saw Akira working at a coffee shop. He looked panicked and pleaded, "Please don't tell Mom." It turned out he had lied about the corporate job to avoid worrying her. "Akira, a client of my company is looking for someone who can speak Japanese with management experience," I said quietly. Initially bewildered, Akira looked into my eyes and asked, "Why? Would you consider me?" "Because we're family. Besides, don't you want to show Michelle the kind of father you used to be?" From that day, I began supporting Akira's job hunt in secret. I helped revise his resume, practiced interviews with him, and even wrote recommendation letters. We were making progress together, unnoticed by anyone else. With just 2 weeks until Christmas, our family was approaching a significant turning point. The calm of our middle-class neighborhood was gradually disrupted by seasonal events and family gatherings. I felt that Keiko was looking at me more critically than ever before. The difference in how she treated her grandchildren was stark. To her, I was merely a stepdaughter, and Jefferson was just a step-grandson. Gabriel tried to comfort me, suggesting that it might be Keiko's way of showing love. However, her recent behavior had become more blatant, and the differential treatment of the grandchildren was becoming unbearable at family gatherings. During family photo sessions, Keiko would prominently place Michelle and almost exclude Jefferson. Always conscious of appearances, she sometimes referred to me as the daughter of the previous wife, and would introduce Jefferson to others as the child of my deceased husband's previous wife and her husband. I always felt uncomfortable. While Keiko enthusiastically introduced Akira and Michelle to friends, Jefferson and I were treated as if invisible. Nonetheless, Jefferson and Michelle played well together at school. Recently, a teacher told me that during lunch, Michelle had swapped her vegetables with Jefferson to accommodate his egg allergy. Perhaps the complex emotions of adults don't matter to children. "Mom, it's fun reading books at the library with Michelle," Jefferson would say with an innocent smile, tightening my heart. I wondered how long their pure relationship could last. What was particularly painful were Keiko's words referring to Jefferson as a problem child because of his allergy. At Keiko's birthday party 3 months ago, during the selection of family photos for display, she chose images where Akira and Michelle were prominently featured, relegating us to the corners. "Ah, there weren't any better photos. Jefferson looks so gloomy in this one." "Maybe it's because of his allergy," she remarked. I will never forget how Jefferson's shoulders shook at those words. The disparity in their gifts also grew more noticeable over the years. Michelle received the latest tablet for her birthday, while Jefferson got a set of used picture books. The difference was evident to anyone. The same was true on social media. Keiko's Facebook overflowed with photos of Michelle's piano recitals, horse riding classes, and swimming competitions. But not a single photo from Jefferson's school festival was posted. After my father's death, I continued to send money to the household anonymously, fulfilling his wishes, but Keiko was unaware of this. Her cold attitude had begun to pain my heart. Amidst this, Gabriel had to suddenly travel to New York for an important meeting, just 2 days before our family's Christmas party at the family home. The night before he left, Gabriel took my hand and asked with apologetic eyes, "Are you sure you'll be okay with Keiko?" "Yes, I'll be fine. Don't worry." 2 days later, we prepared meticulously. We bought Keiko's favorite apple pie from Whole Foods, and Jefferson dressed in a navy blazer with a white shirt. As he adjusted his collar repeatedly in the car, he asked, "Do you think Grandma will be happy?" Watching him, my heart tightened. We arrived at Keiko's house exactly at 6 p.m. This was also the house filled with memories of my father. Upon opening the door, we were greeted by the aroma of roasted turkey, the sweet scent of sweet potato casserole, and the warm smells of cinnamon and nutmeg. Christmas dinner was ready. As we were led into the living room, I immediately noticed something was off. The dining table was elegantly set, but there were only 4 seats, and there was no place for Jefferson. "Oh, I forgot." Keiko's voice seemed intentional. "Jefferson, you'll have to eat on the living room sofa." The room froze at her words. Michelle looked confused, and then Keiko shockingly added, "My real grandchild is only Akira's child. You are just the child of the other wife's daughter." It felt as though time had stopped. Tears sparkled in Jefferson's eyes, and his small body trembled. Akira turned away, and Michelle could not hide her shock. At that moment, something snapped inside me. For 2 years since my father's death, I had tried to mend our relationship with her. The monthly financial support was also to honor a promise to my father. But I could no longer endure it. "Jefferson, let's go home," I said, taking my son's small hand and standing up. The apple pie we brought remained untouched on the table. The ride home was silent. I could see tears welling up on my face in the rearview mirror. During the drive, Jefferson did not speak a word. I could feel his hand gripping my arm tighter and tighter. When we arrived home, the clock read 7:15 p.m. The sound of the garage door closing seemed louder than usual. The silence after turning off the engine underscored our heartache. "Mommy." Jefferson's voice trembled. His small body curled up in the passenger seat looked about to crumble. "It's okay, Jefferson. Let's spend tonight, just the 2 of us," I reassured him. As soon as we entered the house, Jefferson broke down crying. His cries tore at my heart. "Is it my fault? Did I do something to make Grandma hate me?" I immediately hugged him tightly. "No, you did nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing." We walked over to the sofa in the living room. I tried to stay calm, but every time I felt my son's small body tremble, anger welled up inside me. "Jefferson, just wait a moment," I said, and headed to the kitchen to make some hot cocoa. I took marshmallows from the cupboard and poured them into his favorite blue mug. Even from the living room, I could hear his soft sobs. I brought over a soft blanket with star patterns that Gabriel had bought, draping it over Jefferson's shoulders. "Here's some hot cocoa." I put in lots of marshmallows, I said. Jefferson nodded timidly and reached for the mug. His gesture tightened my chest again. "Jefferson, can I tell Daddy about what happened today?" After a moment, he nodded slightly. "What if Daddy gets angry? Daddy will always be on your side, Jefferson. We are family," I assured him as I picked up my phone. "Hello, Naomi? What's wrong at this hour?" Gabriel's voice from a hotel in New York was immediately filled with concern. "Gabriel, we went to Keiko's house today." While trying to remain as calm as possible, I explained each event in detail, the arrangement of the seats, how Jefferson was treated, and Keiko's words. While explaining, I could hear Gabriel's breathing grow rough over the phone. "I can't believe it. Keiko's behavior has been getting stranger since your father died, but I never imagined it would go this far." his voice mixed anger and sadness. "I'm coming home right away. The meeting is over. I'm booking a flight now. But you were supposed to come back on tomorrow's flight, right? Family comes first. I'm coming home right away." I heard the typing on a computer through the phone. "Naomi, let's stop the monthly support. We've done enough for your father's sake." "Gabriel, Akira should take care of Keiko. We have our own family to look after." "Okay. Do you want to talk to Jefferson?" When Jefferson took the phone, he looked anxious as he held the receiver. "Jefferson, listen. Daddy is very proud of you. You are our precious son. I will definitely be home tomorrow," his father reassured him. Tears welled up in Jefferson's eyes again, but they seemed to be tears of a different kind. That night, after Jefferson fell asleep, I found myself staring at a photo of my father. I remembered how desperately he had tried to bridge the gap between me and Keiko. He had hoped until the end that we would become a real family. The next morning at 7 a.m., the doorbell rang. Jefferson was still asleep. I hurried downstairs and opened the door, only to find Keiko standing there. But this was not the Keiko I knew, with perfect makeup and hairstyle. Her bare face showed deep fatigue, her hair was disheveled, and her hands were slightly trembling. "Naomi, I need to talk," she said, her voice lacking its usual arrogance and instead sounding shaky. "Please come in," I said as I led her into the living room, fighting a mix of complex emotions, anger, distrust, and sadness. As we passed by my father's memorial photo, Keiko paused for a moment. "Would you like some coffee?" I offered. "Thank you," she replied, her voice thin and trembling. When I returned to the living room with the coffee, only the sound of the coffee maker broke the heavy silence. I placed 2 mugs on a tray and returned to the room, where Keiko was staring blankly out the window. When I handed her the coffee, deep fatigue was etched on her profile. "I'm sorry," she began with a formal apology. "I was wrong," she added, hesitating with her words. Keiko pulled out an envelope from her bag. When she opened it, it was neatly lined with records of the financial support I had been sending. "Last night, Akira told me, the monthly support came from you. I always thought it was from him. He knew all along. Every time I mistreated you, it hurt him." Akira had confessed everything to her the night before. About the financial support from me, his silent struggles, the lie about his reemployment, how Jefferson and Michelle got along at school, and how I had been helping him with his job hunt. I was so ashamed, I couldn't sleep all night, to think that you were supporting us all along, and yet It seemed she had something else she couldn't say. I waited silently for her to continue. The ticking of the clock sounded louder than usual. Why didn't you tell me?" I always thought that Akira was the one struggling for us. "But it was you. It was my promise to Dad," I responded, and Keiko's body shook. "On the last day my father was in the hospital, I was alone with him. He was frail from chemotherapy and weakly held my hand. Naomi, I'm sorry. I've always made things hard for you." "That's not true, Dad." "Yes, I know. You've always been patient, considering my relationship with Keiko. But you don't need to anymore. Just promise me one thing." "What?" "Please look after Keiko. She's been through a divorce and struggled to raise Akira alone. Marrying me was supposed to be a new life for her." My father sighed deeply. "She depended almost entirely on my income for her future in America. She'll really struggle without me. About $1,000 a month. That would help her maintain her current lifestyle. But why not Akira? Akira is still trying to get his life together. He can't afford to look after his mother as well. Naomi, I think you can." His expression was painfully earnest. I could only nod silently. He was worried about you until the end. He wanted me to love you like my own daughter, but I couldn't, Keiko said. After my father's death, her financial issues became severe. Continuing the lavish lifestyle had drained her savings, and she couldn't even afford the initial fee for the upscale retirement home she had planned to enter. Her pride kept her from seeking help, and she maintained herself by believing the financial support was from Akira. "You've managed to balance work and parenting so well. Your family is so harmonious." In contrast, Akira failed in his job and his marriage. I blamed myself for his upbringing and struggled. Pride and desperation made me act irrationally, especially towards Jefferson. Her voice broke off, and she began to cry more intensely. I was terrible to Jefferson. It's unforgivable. Just then, the sound of small footsteps descending the stairs could be heard. "Grandma?" Jefferson's voice froze the room. Keiko slowly looked up, tears still marking her makeup-free face. "Jefferson, I'm truly sorry for what I said yesterday." She stood up tremblingly and knelt in front of him. "I'm really sorry. Grandma was wrong." Jefferson hesitantly approached Keiko. The room was filled with a mysterious tranquility, as if my father was watching over the two of them. Just then, the sound of the front door opening could be heard. "Naomi, Jefferson." It was Gabriel's voice. He must have caught an earlier flight. Gabriel hurried into the living room and was at a loss for words at the sight before him, his stepmother kneeling on the floor, his wife in tears, and his son looking anxious. "What's going on?" A long conversation ensued about Keiko's financial situation, the reasons behind her past actions, and most importantly, the future of the family. Gabriel listened quietly, but attentively. "Why didn't you talk to us sooner?" I was embarrassed. "I didn't want to burden you." "Aren't we family? We could have figured out a solution together." Hearing this, Keiko began to cry again, but these tears seemed different. "Let's discuss the future as a family," I added, and Gabriel nodded. I was feeling a whirlwind of complex emotions inside. I had fulfilled my promise to my father, but I was unsure about how to move forward. Sensing my conflicted emotions, Keiko spoke up. "I'm going to change my lifestyle so I won't have to depend on you." Saying this, she smiled, looking as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. "Keiko." I was touched by her resolve and took her hand. "Let's gradually become a real family. Maybe someday we can fulfill Dad's wishes." 6 months have passed since then. I stopped sending money to Keiko. She gave up on her plans for the retirement home and chose a simpler life. Akira also got hired at a company I introduced him to, and he is gradually moving towards independence. While we haven't fully reconciled, at least Jefferson is starting to build a new relationship with his grandmother. It might not be exactly as my father had wished, but perhaps we are starting to find our own way of being a family. I am Brittany, 27 years old. Since birth, I've been treated as the black sheep by my family. My brother Chris graduated from a prestigious university and has been walking the path of an elite. My sister Vanessa, a housewife now, has always been clever, having graduated from the same prestigious university as my brother. My parents have always been proud of them, constantly referring to them as our pride and joy. On the other hand, I chose to work right after high school instead of pursuing further education. I wanted to become independent sooner and carve my own path through my abilities. However, my family dismissed this choice, continuously looking down on me as a dropout because I didn't go to college. This was their ultimate proof that I was the failure of the family. From a young age, I have received different treatment compared to Chris and Vanessa. Every time my siblings achieved something, my parents would praise them extravagantly. If Chris won a math contest, the entire family would go out for a celebratory dinner, and if Vanessa was listed among the top students at her university, my mother would proudly call all our relatives. But when I won a prize at an art contest, my mother's reaction was, "Anyone could get that, right?" Despite this, I continued to strive for my family's approval. My grades were not bad. But since they were not as outstanding as my siblings, whatever I did was just considered mediocre. Even when I was praised by my teacher at a piano recital, I was told, "It's not like you're going to music school, so it doesn't matter." I gradually came to realize that no matter how hard I tried, it was futile. After high school, I decided not to go to college but to work instead. When I told my family, the dinner table fell silent for a moment. "So, you mean to say you'll be stuck in low-paying jobs all your life?" My sister laughed. "Well, someone has to do the menial jobs for society to function," my brother shrugged. My parents sighed in dismay and said nothing more to me. That was their sign of disappointment. But I was different. Although I didn't go to college, I didn't end up just another worker. After entering the workforce, I worked hard, was recognized by my superiors, and continued to achieve results. Now, at 27, I have succeeded as an executive in a company and earn a high income. But I haven't told my family any of this. They wouldn't listen to me anyway. One day, I received an invitation to Christmas dinner from my mother. It's an annual family gathering, but I had been skipping it for years, citing work. This year, tempted by my mother's insistence, "Show your face," for once I decided to attend, harboring a faint hope that perhaps our relationship might improve. On the day of the dinner, when I entered the private room of the upscale restaurant, my entire family was already there. Chris, his wife Michelle, and their sons Aaron and Wesley were present. So were Vanessa, her husband Thomas, and their 3 daughters, Mia, Nicole, and Tess. My parents were happily watching their grandchildren, engaging in lively conversation. "You finally made it, Brittany," Vanessa smiled. I felt a bit relieved. Maybe they would welcome me normally this time. That sweet thought crossed my mind. But in the next moment, Chris laughed. "We're short of chairs. What about Brittany's seat?" Then my mother coldly stated, "Since you're just a high school graduate, you should sit on the floor." Everyone in the family laughed. Even Chris's children snickered at me. "You're joking, right?" I asked, disbelief in my eyes. But my mother's expression didn't change as she said, "It's nostalgic, isn't it? Sitting on the floor like when you were a child. Back then, as a child, I was often pushed aside after my siblings, and if there were no seats, I was forced to sit on the floor. But I thought it was okay because I was just a kid. But now it's different. I'm a 27-year-old adult. Even my nieces and nephews have proper seats, so why am I the only one being forced to sit on the floor?" "Brittany, since you're just a high school graduate, be humble," Chris laughed. "Yes, people at the bottom of society are different from us." Vanessa sipped her wine. The entire family was laughing at me. At that moment, I realized they would never see me as an equal. No matter what I did or how hard I tried, I would always be the failure in this family. Anger welled up inside me. With frustration and humiliation shaking my body, I still managed to suppress my emotions and quietly headed towards the door. "What's wrong? Did you get upset?" Chris sneered sarcastically. "How selfish. You should just sit quietly," Vanessa added. "Let's start the meal." My mother spoke as if nothing had happened. I didn't say anything. I just looked around at them. Then, I said just one sentence. "Sorry for disturbing you all." With that, I left the private room. I could hear the family stirring behind me. "Wait, Brittany." My mother's voice followed me, but I didn't look back. At that moment, I decided. I was done with this family. I would no longer give a part of my life to people who look down on me and ridicule me. They would probably realize what they had lost, but not anytime soon. As I left the restaurant, I felt the cold winter air and took a deep breath. Anger and frustration swirled inside me, yet curiously, no tears came. Crying over it seemed foolish now. My family had always looked down on me, mocked me, and trampled on my efforts. It had been that way since childhood. There was no reason to engage with them any longer. My smartphone vibrated. Without checking, I knew it was messages from my family. Sure enough, names like Chris, Vanessa, and my mother appeared on the notification screen. From my mother, "After all the trouble of inviting you, aren't you being rude?" Chris said, "Grow up, Brittany. It was just a joke, right?" Vanessa commented, "Are you satisfied with ruining a family gathering? You're too selfish." I sighed and deleted those messages unread. Their words could no longer reach my heart. They had always thought of me as a failure. They must have thought I was just a high school graduate, stuck in low-wage jobs, desperately working. But the reality was different. I now hold a position and earn an income that anyone would envy. Right after high school, I started working as an apprentice in an administrative role at a small company. I had no special skills, but lacking academic credentials, I had to work harder than anyone. I arrived earlier and left later than anyone else each day. I took on tasks no one else wanted and thought thoroughly about how to correct any mistakes I made. My attitude was noticed by my supervisor then, who is now president of my company, Mr. Patrick Brown. He valued real ability and effort over academic background. "Brittany, you work hard. Unlike the others, you have grit," he told me 2 years after I joined. I was thrilled. For the first time, I felt that someone recognized my efforts. Later, Patrick started his own company from scratch. Now, he's well known in the industry for growing his business into a renowned enterprise. When I heard he was starting his own company, I decided without hesitation to follow him. I wanted to grow further using what I had learned under him. Under his leadership, where skills are valued over academic degrees, I knew I could test my own abilities. So I worked even harder. I learned about management, gained marketing knowledge, and began to contribute to the company's growth. Patrick did not overlook my efforts and promoted me to increasingly important positions. At 23, I became the leader of the sales department. I dramatically increased the company's revenue and earned the trust of our clients. At 26, I was promoted to an executive role. Now at 27, I am part of the management team. My income is more than my family could imagine. Ironically, I have been financially supporting my brother's children's education. My parents and his family probably never deeply considered where that money came from, just assuming it was only natural for the family. However, in reality, it was my earnings they looked down upon that allowed their children to attend good schools. I scrolled through my smartphone and opened a folder. It was filled with screenshots of insulting messages from my family over the years. Too arrogant for a high school grad, bottom of society, useless, each word now far removed from my current reality. I couldn't just cut ties, I decided to take legal action. I planned to present these past insults and emotional abuse as evidence and claim damages for mental anguish. I also decided to immediately stop supporting my brother's children's education. I sent one final message to my family. "Please do not contact me anymore. I do not consider you my family." Then, I turned off my smartphone. I was no longer their failure. I had made it here on my own strength. Now it was their turn to pay for insulting me. A few days had passed since that humiliating Christmas dinner. Since that incident, I had completely ignored any attempts by my family to contact me. My smartphone continued to display unread messages and missed calls from my mother, brother, and sister. I no longer felt the need to listen to their words. However, I wasn't planning to simply ignore my family and leave it at that. They had looked down upon and ridiculed me, and I was determined to make them pay a price for their actions. I quietly, yet assuredly, began preparing to corner them. Firstly, I initiated the process of cutting off the educational financial support I had been providing for Chris's children. Originally, I had been partially funding the tuition for Chris's eldest son, Aaron, and his younger brother, Wesley. Chris, a graduate of a prestigious university and employed at a major corporation, had a tendency to live beyond his means due to his pretentious nature. He had purchased a house in an upscale neighborhood, drove foreign cars, and wore designer brands. His wife, Michelle, also had a penchant for luxury and frequently went to parties and on trips. Because of this, their household finances were always in dire straits. The tuition fees for their children, who attended a private prestigious school, were especially a significant burden, costing tens of thousands of dollars annually. Chris and his wife naturally sought financial help from my parents. However, my parents were also struggling with their retirement funds and found it difficult to continue their support. That's when my mother came to me and said, "Brittany, you're also a part of this family, so please help out a little." She expected me to shoulder the tuition fees for my nephews as if it were the most natural thing. "You're single and don't have children, so you must have some money to spare," she said without a hint of malice, as if it were my duty to sacrifice my life for the family. At that time, I might have still had some residual feelings for my family. Although I was angry at my brother and his wife's attitude, their children were innocent. I decided to help with the tuition to ensure they received a good education. However, that was a mistake. Chris came to view my assistance as something he was entitled to. What was even more troublesome was Vanessa. Once she found out that I was helping with Chris's children's tuition fees, she demanded, "You should also help my children in the same way. It's unfair if you're only helping Chris's kids." Her attitude, taking my goodwill for granted, filled me with anger and emptiness. They hardly ever said, "Thank you." Instead, I had even received remarks like, "For a high school grad, you're surprisingly well off," laced with sarcasm. Without my help, Chris's children wouldn't have been able to attend their current schools, but they never bothered to acknowledge that. Then, on that Christmas night, I was ridiculed by the entire family. Despite my financial contributions, they laughed and said, "A high school grad should sit on the floor." At that moment, I decided to withdraw all my support. I immediately contacted my lawyer. "I want to stop supporting my brother and sister's children's tuition fees immediately. Is there any problem with that?" The lawyer seemed a bit surprised but responded quickly, "As long as there's no written agreement, you are free to stop the support." Upon hearing this, I formally stopped paying the tuition fees. At the same time, I sent an email to Chris and Vanessa. "I have been supporting the tuition fees until now, but I will cease all support going forward. Please do not ask me for any financial support in the future." Minutes after sending the email, I received a call from Chris, which I ignored. Then, a message from Vanessa arrived. "What do you mean you won't pay the tuition anymore? Are you joking? Isn't it natural for family members to help each other out? Don't you feel sorry for the children?" I sighed and turned off my smartphone screen. Next, I began compiling evidence of my family's past behavior. This included insulting messages from my brother and sister, as well as recordings of the emotional abuse spoken by my mother at family gatherings. In fact, since high school, I had been secretly recording their behavior, thinking it might be useful someday. Every time they hurled contemptuous or insulting words at me, I suppressed my frustration and collected them as evidence. Now, the time had come for those recordings to have meaning. I organized all the evidence and submitted it to my lawyer. After carefully reviewing the materials, the lawyer said quietly, "Brittany, you have sufficient evidence for a defamation and emotional distress claim. If you wish to take legal action, we have everything we need." I nodded. "Please proceed." I was done being insulted and exploited by my family. I was ready to make them face the consequences of their actions. A few days later, formal notices were sent to my brother, sister, and parents. This was the true beginning of my revenge. The formal notice sent through the lawyer arrived at my family's homes exactly 2 weeks after the Christmas dinner. The contents were clear. The first was on immediate cessation of tuition support for my nephews and nieces. The second was on claims for defamation and emotional distress due to past insults and emotional abuse. The last one was a demand that they cease all contact with me going forward. As soon as this notice reached my family, My smartphone began ringing intensely with calls from Chris, Vanessa, my mother, my father, and even Michelle and Thomas. However, I ignored them all. I had already been in contact with a lawyer and arranged for all future interactions to be handled through my legal representative. A few days later, I received a surprising report from my lawyer. "Brittany, your brother Chris has hired a lawyer and is planning to object to the cessation of your support." I couldn't help but laugh. What exactly is he objecting to? I never signed a contract. I was merely assisting out of kindness. Exactly. Legally, you are under no obligation to continue the assistance. However, he is claiming that cutting off the support suddenly is unjust and could ruin his children's future. I sighed in disbelief. Did Chris think it was my duty to pay for his children's schooling? Why should I have to support his household to this extent? I am neither his wife nor his children's parents. Moreover, I owe them nothing. On the contrary, these are the people who have looked down upon me, mocked me, and insulted me. I told my lawyer firmly. Of course, I have no intention of making any concessions. Understood. I will send a formal response rejecting his claims. Subsequently, chaos seemed to spread among the family. First, Chris's household began to crumble. Without my financial support, he could no longer afford the tuition fees for Aaron and Wesley. He had always pretended to be more affluent than he was, even going into debt to maintain a luxurious lifestyle. The moment my support ended, his facade collapsed. Michelle panicked and blamed Chris. "What are we going to do? We can't live like this." She was only concerned about continuing her lavish lifestyle. If they couldn't afford the children's tuition fees, they shouldn't force them to attend a private school. Yet, she refused to accept that. Eventually, their marital conflicts became incessant, and I heard that Michelle had taken the children and gone back to her parents' house. Chris was left alone, struggling to pay for his children's education. Similarly, my sister Vanessa's household was in turmoil. Although she had always lived with the pride of being a highly educated, successful person, in reality, she was a housewife, and it was her husband, Thomas, who supported the family financially. Thomas was a calm and rational man. He had never insulted me, but he also never defended me at family gatherings. However, after I took legal action against the family, Thomas changed his attitude. If Brittany is serious about taking legal action, it must mean she was treated terribly, right? He confronted Vanessa after seeing the evidence and the numerous insulting messages I had submitted. Initially, Vanessa claimed it was just a joke and that I was overly paranoid, but Thomas became stern after reviewing the proof. "You've been mocking your sister to this extent? I never thought you were such a person." Thomas took the children and left home for a while. Despite Vanessa's desperate attempts to mend things, their marriage cooled significantly. And as for my parents, they both sent me messages of apology. "Brittany, we're sorry. It was wrong of us to treat you that way. We're family. Let's stop fighting. Please forgive everyone." I scoffed at these messages. They're apologizing now. When I needed help from the family, they always ignored me. They belittled my efforts and continued to deny my worth. And now, at the moment I decided to abandon them, they say, "We're family?" I didn't respond. I simply told my lawyer, no action needed. Thus, the family fell apart. I didn't even bother to imagine how they felt, because it was no longer my concern. They were merely reaping the consequences of their actions. I was looking out the office window. Beyond the urban skyline, the setting sun cast a beautiful orange glow. It had been a while since I had the time to enjoy this view. I had been so engrossed in my work that I rarely took moments like this for myself. But now I am different. Freed from the shackles of my family, I had gained the freedom to live my own life. Ultimately, Chris's household collapsed completely without my support. Unable to make tuition payments, his children had to leave the prestigious schools. Aaron transferred to a public high school, and Wesley went to a local school. Chris's performance at work also declined, and he no longer had the means to keep up appearances. Accustomed to luxury, Michelle could not endure the lowered standard of living and eventually filed for divorce. Chris once looked down on me as the bottom of society. But what about him now? He had lost social standing and his family had disintegrated, becoming the low-income person he once despised. The irony. Vanessa also fell from grace. She was a person full of pride. She cherished her titles as highly educated, elite, and elegant housewife, looking down on those she deemed beneath her. But her husband Thomas, having seen the evidence I provided, had completely lost patience with her. Saying, "I cannot let such a person raise my children," Thomas decided to divorce Vanessa. Vanessa tried to contact him numerous times, but it was too late. And her life, too, changed drastically. Having depended on her husband, she lacked the ability to be independent. Unable to maintain her lavish lifestyle, she reluctantly started looking for part-time work. I heard that Vanessa, who once flaunted her elite status, started working as a cashier at a supermarket. I felt an indescribable emotion hearing this. Surely she must remember the times she looked down on me as she stood behind that register. And then my parents. They had favored my brother and sister over the years, continuously overlooking my existence. As a result, they had now lost their reliable children. Through the lawsuit, I formally requested my family to never contact me again. My parents received the notice through my lawyer and sent me multiple messages. "Brittany, don't abandon your mom and dad. Let's put the past behind us. We're family, after all. Let's start over." However, I deleted these messages unread. Had they ever treated me as family? Despite all my efforts and successes, they continued to look down on me because I was just a high school graduate. And now, only when they are in trouble, they say, "Help us because we're family." It took me 27 years to free myself from their shackles. But it's finally over. Afterward, I started a new life. I only associated with people who valued me, dedicating myself to work alongside colleagues I truly respected. Around me were people who judged me not by academic credentials, but by my effort and character. One day, President Brown said to me, "Brittany, you have truly grown. Education doesn't matter, you got here on your own merit." I smiled slightly and responded, "Thank you." For 27 years, I wanted my family's recognition. But that's no longer necessary. Now, I am living a life I can be proud of more than anyone else. Months later, on a whim, I visited a restaurant. It was the upscale restaurant where I had been insulted by my family that Christmas night. Instead of a private room, I chose an open seat by the window and sipped wine alone. The restaurant was as lively as that night, but my feelings were completely different. There, I was not the person who was looked down upon and ridiculed. I have become a successful person who has earned her place in life through her own efforts. I overheard a couple at the next table. "Did you know? There's this incredible woman who became an executive at a major corporation recently. She's a high school graduate but climbed up through sheer effort." Wow, that's impressive. Education really doesn't matter, does it? I raised my glass and smiled subtly. Yes, I am no longer the family's failure. I am Samantha. I have lived with my father since I was young. My mother passed away from illness when I was 5 years old. She was always kind, reading me picture books and hugging me tightly before sleep. However, that warmth was suddenly taken from me. After my mother's absence, our home felt too cold and quiet. For the first few years, my father was submerged in grief. Yet, he tried to recover by immersing himself in his work. After some time, he started dating occasionally but never introduced any women to me, likely out of consideration for my feelings. Despite this, we lived peacefully together. On weekends, we watched movies or had picnics in the park. Even though he was busy, my father always made sure to bake a cake for my birthday and attended my school events whenever possible. However, around the time I turned 14 years old, my father was promoted and his job became even busier. He started traveling more, only being home about 5 days a month. I spent a lot of time alone, but I kept telling myself that Dad is working hard. Even though I felt lonely, I believed our relationship was still one of mutual support. But I was mistaken. One day, he suddenly announced we're going to have a new family. Samantha, this is Elizabeth. She's going to be my wife. The woman he introduced wore sophisticated clothes and had a refined smile. Her blonde hair was neatly styled to her shoulders, and she extended her hand gracefully. Nice to meet you, Samantha. I'm happy to become your new mother. At that moment, a chill ran down my spine. Her smile was too perfect, almost artificial. Furthermore, Elizabeth had 2 children, 18-year-old Anthony and 16-year-old Christina. Though they were close to my age, they seemed like complete strangers to me. Let's get along as a family, Elizabeth said, but a sense of unease spread within me. As soon as Elizabeth and her children moved in, the atmosphere changed. Initially, Elizabeth acted kindly, smiling and saying, "Let's get along, Samantha." However, when my father left for his first business trip, her attitude shifted. "Samantha, you're part of the family, so you'll help around the house, right?" Feeling a sense of discomfort with those words, I nodded and said, yes. Helping out with chores was fine. But soon, it was clear that helping meant doing everything. I made breakfast, washed dishes, cleaned, and did laundry. Elizabeth drank coffee in the living room elegantly, Christina was busy with her smartphone, and Anthony was immersed in his games. One day I asked, "Hey Christina, aren't you going to help too?" At that, Christina laughed dismissively. "What? Why should I? You do it." "I'm busy with a photo shoot for my social media." Anthony snorted. "That's a woman's job." Elizabeth just sipped her coffee, looking pleased. When my father returned from his trip, Elizabeth began her performance. "Welcome back, Douglas. I've been taking care of everything at home. It's tough, but I can manage the family." I was dumbfounded. I had done everything, yet Elizabeth acted as if she was the one struggling. My father thanked her. "Thank you, Elizabeth," and turned to me with a smile. "Is Samantha helping a bit?" "Yes." I swallowed my words. Arguing seemed pointless without evidence, and my father might not believe me. Thus began my days of hell. Elizabeth's dominance escalated daily, but I couldn't ask for help from anyone. If I talked back, I was scolded for being impudent, and the punishments grew harsher. After school, I was immediately put to work. I had no time to play with friends or even study. I had to endure. Elizabeth's demands became more severe, and my burden exceeded its limits. Something had to be done. I made a decision and reported to Child Protective Services. When an investigator came and questioned Elizabeth, she cried profusely. "That's not true. I love Samantha like my own daughter. I'm doing everything for her, but she's misunderstanding." Her theatrical voice sent shivers down my spine. However, the investigator couldn't make any conclusion immediately. Days later, the results were communicated. There are issues within the home, but it cannot be labeled as abuse definitively, so only guidance will be provided. I was shocked. Despite all I had endured, nothing would change? Elizabeth sneered, "To do such a thing, what a terrible child," and since then, her treatment of me worsened. I became isolated in this house and lost any escape. But I swore to myself, one day, I will definitely turn this situation around. Until that day came, all I could do was endure. My 18th birthday should have been a special day. But reality was different. My father was away on a business trip. Of course, I had received a message from him in advance, apologizing for not being able to be home on my birthday. However, the words that followed chilled my heart. Enjoy a wonderful dinner with Elizabeth and the others. Dinner? For a moment, I didn't understand what was being referred to. Then, the meaning quickly became clear. Elizabeth had lied to my father, claiming, "We are celebrating Samantha's birthday at a famous restaurant in grand style." Of course, there had been no such plans. Like any other day, I came home from school and started preparing dinner. Christina was in the bathroom, as usual, filming videos for her social media. She had many followers and claimed, "I'm going to be an influencer in the future." Anthony, despite having graduated from college, did not work and spent all his time gaming in his room. Elizabeth was drinking wine in the living room. Gathering my courage, I said, "Hey, it's my birthday today." Elizabeth replied with a cool expression, "Oh, that's right. But you're an adult now, so there's no need for special treatment, right?" Christina giggled and added, "Exactly, you're 18 years old now. Why not celebrate by yourself?" I felt anger but held it in and continued making dinner quietly. As we finished eating, the doorbell rang. A package had arrived. It was from my father. When I opened it, there was a beautifully wrapped box and a letter inside. "To Samantha, happy 18th birthday. I am proud of how you always work hard. With love, Dad." As I read the letter, tears nearly spilled from my eyes. However, Elizabeth's cold voice came from behind. "What's that?" "Let me see." She snatched the letter from my hands, glanced at it, and scoffed. "Ah, Douglas does love this kind of thing. Proud of how hard you work. What exactly is she working hard at?" "Elizabeth, give it back." When I reached out, Elizabeth deliberately threw the letter onto the sofa. "Well, you should be grateful. But things are going to change now." "What do you mean?" I watched her warily. Elizabeth took a sip of her wine and smirked. "You're 18 years old now, right? That means you're an adult." "So what?" "As an adult, it's normal to pay your own rent, isn't it?" I couldn't believe my ears. "Pay my own rent?" "That's right. From now on, you'll be paying $1,000 a month." Christina and Anthony chuckled. "Well, it makes sense. You can't expect to live here for free forever." "But it's only $1,000, so you should be grateful," Anthony added. I was beyond angry. What about Christina and Anthony? What about them? Do they pay rent too? Elizabeth shrugged dismissively. "Don't be silly, Samantha. They're family, so they don't need to." "Aren't I family too?" Elizabeth smirked. "You're not my real daughter." At that moment, something inside me snapped. I silently returned to my room and opened a drawer in my desk. Inside was an important property deed. It clearly stated that the house was in my name. My mother had left it for me. The owner of the house was neither Elizabeth nor even my father, but me. The next morning, I consulted a lawyer. Then he calmly said, "The house is in your name. That means you have the right to charge for rent from anyone living here." "That's right. Conversely, Elizabeth and her children cannot live here without your permission. If they don't pay rent, they can be treated as squatters." "I see." I smiled slowly. That night, in the living room with Elizabeth and the others, I quietly said, "I don't think I should be the one paying rent. You should be," I suggested. "What?" Elizabeth looked shocked. "This house is in my name. If you want to keep living here, you should be the ones paying rent," I explained. "Samantha, you're kidding, right?" Christina exclaimed in panic. Anthony tried to say something but was at a loss for words. "If you don't pay, you'll need to leave," I stated firmly. "You're joking?" Elizabeth screamed. But I was done holding back. "Elizabeth, you said it yourself, didn't you? It's normal for adults to pay rent," I reminded her. Elizabeth's face turned red with anger as she yelled, "Douglas would never allow this. I responded calmly. Then why don't you call Dad and check with him? Elizabeth was left speechless. Silence took over the living room. My counterattack had finally begun. The next morning, I received a call from my father. "Samantha, can you talk right now?" "Yes, Dad. What's going on?" "Elizabeth called me. She said you told them they had to pay rent. Is that true?" I took a deep breath and answered quietly. "Yes, it's true." My father sounded puzzled. I could hear a small sigh from the other end of the phone. "Samantha, can't you reconsider? They are upset because it was so sudden." I closed my eyes quietly. Reconsider? Would someone who truly understood what I had been through say that? "Dad, can I ask you something?" "What is it, Samantha?" "Do you know what kind of treatment I've been receiving from Elizabeth and her kids all this time?" "Huh?" "While you were away on business trips, I was always the one stuck with the household chores. Elizabeth didn't do anything, but when you came back, she'd act like she'd done everything. Is that true?" "That's not all. Even when I reported to Child Protective Services, it ended with just a warning because there wasn't enough evidence." "You didn't know, but I've been fighting this alone." "Samantha, that's..." And yet, the moment I turned 18 years old, she said, "You're an adult now, so you should pay rent. Anthony and Christina are family, but you're not my real daughter." My father was silent for a while. I knew that it was necessary for him to face the realities he had failed to see. Eventually, he said slowly, "I'm sorry, Samantha. I didn't know anything, and you didn't try to know." My father had nothing to say in return. "I can't forgive Elizabeth and her kids. So, they need to leave," I stated firmly. "Understood, Samantha." His voice was a bit shaky. When the call ended, I stared at the ceiling, holding my phone tightly. But it wasn't over yet. I wouldn't let my guard down until Elizabeth and her kids were out of this house. That night, I faced Elizabeth and her children in the living room. "Everybody, I've made a decision." Elizabeth crossed her arms and glared at me coldly. Christina sat with a sullen look, crossing her legs, while Anthony was busy with his smartphone as usual. "The house is in my name. If you want to stay, pay rent. But if you don't pay, you'll need to leave." Elizabeth scoffed. "Samantha, you're joking, right? You're still a child and you say that. I'm an adult, right? Didn't you say that yourself?" Elizabeth's expression stiffened. "I've decided. You have 30 days to leave." Christina stood up abruptly, kicking the chair. "What? Who do you think you are? This is Dad's house." "No, it's my house." "That's a lie." Elizabeth raised her voice. "But I had already prepared the documents and placed them on the table. Here, the property deed. Feel free to check it." Elizabeth's complexion changed instantly. "What? I can no longer forgive how you've treated me like a maid. So, you need to leave this house," Elizabeth said with a trembling voice. "Don't mess with me. A child like you doesn't have the right to decide something like this. The law seems to think otherwise." As I recalled the advice from my lawyer, I calmly informed them, "If you don't vacate within 30 days, I can sue you for illegal occupancy." Anthony, still clutching his smartphone, muttered, "Seriously?" Christina looked incredulous. "I'll tell Dad." Elizabeth shouted, "I already spoke to him." I replied calmly. "What did he say?" "He said he understood," I said. Elizabeth's face turned pale. "No, this can't be." Christina stood up, yelling, "This is ridiculous. Kicked out by a kid like this." "It's not ridiculous. I've made this decision," I stated. I stood up, gathered the documents, and added just one more thing. "Pack your things within 30 days. I then left the living room. Behind me, I could hear Elizabeth's shouts and Christina's cries, but it didn't matter anymore. This is my house. Days passed since I notified Elizabeth and her children about the eviction. They were clearly panicking but seemed to have no real intention of leaving. Christina and Anthony remained defiant, and Elizabeth was obviously scheming to corner me somehow. Then, finally, my father returned from his business trip. The moment I heard the front door open, I headed to the living room. "Douglas!" Elizabeth cried out, throwing herself at him in a scene that seemed straight out of a movie. "Honey, you have to understand." Samantha suddenly started saying crazy things, trying to kick us out. "Where are we supposed to go?" She's confused. "Please, say something to her." Elizabeth's performance was perfect. Crying desperately, she played the part of the unjustly ousted, pitiful stepmother. However, I wasn't going to be deceived. Neither was my father anymore. He gently peeled Elizabeth off him and said with a cold look, "Elizabeth, stop the act." "What, honey?" Elizabeth froze. "I contacted Child Protective Services," he continued. At those words, Elizabeth froze. "The CPS?" She repeated in a trembling voice. "I had them verify what kind of treatment you were giving Samantha while I was away, how you've been treating her." His voice was stern. "Honey, what are you talking about?" "I would never do such things." "Don't lie, Elizabeth." His low voice cut her off. "The CPS has records of past abuse reports from Samantha. There was no formal punishment due to insufficient evidence, but it was clear there were problems in the household." I quietly listened to their conversation, surprised yet relieved that my father hadn't just taken my word for it, he had actually checked the facts himself. But, Elizabeth broke down, her voice teary. "It's a misunderstanding. Samantha was just rebelling against me, exaggerating everything. I truly considered her family. So, let me ask," he said sternly, looking down at Elizabeth. "How did you spend Samantha's 18th birthday?" Elizabeth stumbled over her words. Well, that is. You told me it would be celebrated grandly at a restaurant." But in reality, Samantha was making dinner. Elizabeth just opened and closed her mouth, unable to respond. I was too caught up in my work to see what was happening. "But now I understand. What you've done is abuse." Elizabeth collapsed in tears. "Please, Douglas, we're family, aren't we? Believe me. You said you loved me." He sighed and said emotionlessly, "The person I loved wasn't lying to me." Elizabeth's face was drained of all colors. "That's enough. We're getting a divorce." Christina and Anthony watched as their mother broke down. "Why would you say that, Dad?" Christina screamed. "You're abandoning Mom? That's cruel? It's time for you two to face reality." He spoke quietly. "You have always looked down on Samantha and pushed all the household chores onto her. It was wrong of me to have allowed this to go on, but I've reached my limit." Anthony stood up abruptly, kicking his chair. "Don't mess with us. Where are we supposed to live now?" I responded calmly. "You'll have to figure that out on your own." Christina and Anthony glared at me, but their words no longer bothered me. Elizabeth was still trying to cling to Dad. "Please, please. This is wrong. Don't abandon me." "The one who kept deceiving me was you," he replied. With those words, he slowly left the room. Elizabeth collapsed in shock. I looked down at them and stated plainly, "Pack your things quickly and leave." Christina, her face turning red with anger, shouted, "Even if Dad abandons us, this is the only place we have." "Are you going to pay the rent?" I asked calmly. Christina was left speechless. "If you don't pay, it will be considered illegal occupancy." At this, Elizabeth fell completely silent. There was no longer any arrogance or grace in her eyes, only the look of a defeated dog filled with despair. This was the end. I muttered that to myself as I quietly left the living room. A few days later, Dad officially filed for divorce. He proceeded quickly with the proceedings through a lawyer against Elizabeth. She was left completely clueless as she watched the family she had built up crumble before her eyes. But more damning facts came to light. It was discovered that Elizabeth had been using Dad's credit card without his permission in the past. This was considered financial exploitation and even credit card fraud, and Dad's lawyer was preparing for litigation. Receiving this news, Elizabeth was at a loss for words and ultimately lost everything. The false world she had been upholding crumbled completely, and she left the house with a stunned expression. Anthony and Christina, having lost Elizabeth's support, were at a loss for where to go. Anthony continuously moved from one friend's house to another in a nomadic lifestyle, while Christina went through a cycle of living with her boyfriend, breaking up, and then swiftly finding a new boyfriend to ensure she had a place to live. They were forced to face reality beyond the false family they had built. With the liberation from Elizabeth's toxic influence, a sense of subtle relief began to wash over me. As those who were no longer needed departed, the house gradually returned to a state of peaceful tranquility. The noisy days seemed like a lie as the house was enveloped in a calm atmosphere. It became excruciatingly clear to me just how disruptive Elizabeth, Anthony, and Christina had been to the harmony of my world. At the same time, my father expressed his remorse repeatedly. Initially overwhelmed by an indescribable surge of anger, as time progressed, I found myself able to methodically work through my tangled emotions. "Samantha, I am truly sorry for everything. I was completely oblivious to the struggles you were enduring," he earnestly apologized. Regret and frustration were evident in his words. At that moment, I was uncertain about how to react. Deep down, I still harbored feelings of resentment that I found hard to forgive. However, considering he had been manipulated by Elizabeth too, I couldn't bring myself to blame him completely in my heart. I began to think that perhaps my father was just another victim too. Accepting this was not easy, but I decided to gradually try to reconcile. Initially, I was cold towards him, but gradually his sincere demeanor moved me. I may never completely forget, but at least I chose to mend our relationship without being bound by the past, to move forward. Despite the difficulties, I managed to graduate from college. Each step held significant meaning for me. Initially consumed by problems at home, I had no room to think about my future. But after graduating and going through job hunting, I finally began to walk my own path. Then, I made a resolution. I would remodel the house. I developed a desire to make that house a truly peaceful place this time. It was the house my mother left us, where my father and I could start afresh with renewed spirits. "Let's truly make this a place where our hearts can rest easy," I declared as I initiated plans for the renovation. During this period, Elizabeth and the others faced their own struggles. Following her defeat in court, Elizabeth found herself accumulating debt in an effort to manage repayments, leaving her no time to enjoy her previous luxuries like sipping elegantly on coffee or indulging in stylish attire, as she grappled with her new, harsh realities daily. Anthony was trying to find a job but was having trouble securing employment due to his past issues. He was desperately searching for job opportunities but was not progressing well. Christina, who had been thriving as an influencer on social media, faced backlash over a casual remark that went viral. Furthermore, her past actions were exposed online, garnering resentment from followers. I realized that there was no longer a need for me to concern myself with their tribulations. With each step of the house's renovation, the anxiety and anger in my heart gradually faded. The act of renewing the house felt as though it was rejuvenating me as well, and I found myself increasingly eager to see the transformation. Finally, on the day everything was completed, warm light bathed the interior, casting a glow that filled the space with tranquility and a deep sense of security. Realizing that this house is my new starting point, I take a deep breath.